The photos and video released by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, who also redacted parts of the images, also show bathrooms, bedrooms, and a pool area. Steve Scully worked there and spoke to NBC News in 2019, but said he had no idea if underage girls were on the island.
I have no way of knowing that, truly, but they appeared to be young to me.
The new image is part of a slow trickle of information related to the late financier.
These are just disturbing images, never seen before images of what Jeffrey's Island and the estate actually look like.
The Oversight Committee says it has received bank records related to Epstein and expect to release that information soon. But Congress is still waiting for the Department of Justice to release its investigative files after Congress overwhelmingly passed a bill despite pushback from the White House.
Listen to what you just witnessed and let the fury settle into your bones, because this is the architecture of impunity laid bare before your eyes. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee releasing images Wednesday from Jeffrey Epstein's private island that was once the epicenter of decades of abuse, when we're supposed to pretend this slow drip of carefully redacted photographs represents accountability, when the entire machinery of power has spent years ensuring that the most damning evidence never sees daylight. Think about that for a second, because private correspondence shows Epstein writing that Donald Trump spent hours at his house with a victim of sex trafficking, and in a separate email stated explicitly that Trump knew about the girls. Yet here we are watching a bipartisan kabuki theater where both parties performatively demand transparency, while the Department of Justice sits on investigative files that Congress overwhelmingly voted to force into public view. And you need to understand the sheer audacity of what's happening, because Trump signed a bipartisan bill ordering the Department of Justice to release files, but started a 30-day timer that gives Attorney General Pam Bondi time to publicly release unclassified files, except Trump ordered the DOJ to investigate Epstein's involvement with banks and prominent Democratic figures, and Bondi subsequently assigned the investigation to U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton, which means they're opening new investigations precisely so they can claim active cases prevent full disclosure under the law's own exceptions. This is the con, and it's being perpetrated in broad daylight, while survivors watch their trauma become political ammunition in a game that protects everyone except them, because lawyers representing hundreds of victims said dozens of their names appeared unredacted in files released by Congress, and some survivors fear the Justice Department intentionally exposed their names, weaponizing their identities to create chaos that justifies further delays and redactions. And meanwhile, we're supposed to marvel at these disturbing images of bedrooms and pools, and a blackboard with words like power and deception scribbled across it, as if we needed visual confirmation that an island where systematic child sexual abuse occurred for decades had furniture and writing implements. The American ruling class has perfected the art of revelation without consequence, of transparency theater that produces unlimited documentation and zero prosecutions, because the Justice Department concluded no incriminating client list exists, and there was no credible evidence Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, despite Epstein allegedly subtly informing Bill Gates that he knew the software tycoon had an extramarital affair with a Russian bridge player in her early 20s, which sounds precisely like the groundwork for leverage even if it never reached full blackmail. And you have to ask yourself why we're watching this pantomime where House Democrats release materials with strategic redactions, while House Republicans accuse them of selective disclosure. Republicans on the House Oversight Committee slammed Democrats for chasing headlines by releasing materials as never before seen, and criticized Democrats for releasing selective information, both sides performing their assigned roles in a drama designed to exhaust public attention until we collectively shrug and accept that powerful men simply operate by different rules. This is the structure that C. Wright Mills identified 7 decades ago in The Power Elite, the interlocking directorate of political and economic dominance, where those at the commanding heights of society exist in a separate moral universe with its own physics and its own justice system. And what we're witnessing with Epstein is that structure defending itself with every tool at its disposal, because lawmakers took the significant step of ordering Trump's Justice Department to publicly release investigative files after months of nasty infighting within the GOP, and the Epstein issue was quickly creating a major rift between Trump and his MAGA base, which tells you the pressure required even token movement. And yet Republican Rep. Thomas Massie worries the new investigation could be used to block file release, and expressed concern they may be trying to use ongoing investigations as justification for not releasing materials. Recognizing the play even as it unfolds, because this is how elite deviance perpetuates itself through procedural legitimacy, through the performance of investigation that produces mountains of paper, and carefully stage-managed disclosures that never quite reach the throat of power. And we need to be absolutely clear about what's being protected here, because this isn't just about one dead financier and his operation, it's about the entire ecosystem that enabled him, the banks that received records from JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank related to Epstein, the same institutions that settled lawsuits by victims accusing them of willingly thwarting compliance efforts on his behalf, the lawyers and accountants and enablers who personally participated in the Epstein enterprise from approximately 1995 onward. This is organized elite sex trafficking, operating with institutional support for decades while politicians from both parties maintain social and financial connections to the trafficker at its center, and the fact that we're now watching both parties scramble to control the narrative tells you how deeply this corruption penetrates, because accountability for Epstein means accountability for everyone who looked away, everyone who took his money, everyone who attended his parties and flew on his planes and benefited from his network, which is why Massey said he does not believe Trump himself is implicated in the files, but instead is trying to protect a bunch of rich and powerful friends, billionaires, donors to his campaign, friends in his social circles, and this bipartisan protection racket is the thesis statement of American oligarchy written in the suffering of children, because let's be devastatingly clear about what elite sex trafficking represents, what's distinguished from commercial sex trafficking, in that its organizational goal is not to generate revenue, but to access and supply victims to the head of the organization, meaning this was about power and access and the currency of exploitation among men who already had everything except the one thing wealth can't directly buy, which is immunity from consequences. Except it turns out wealth can buy that too, through political donations and social connections, and the complex web of mutual compromise that ensures nobody with real power ever faces real accountability. And you can see the two-tiered justice system crystallized perfectly in this case, where DOJ initiated 146 federal human trafficking prosecutions in FY 2024 and secured convictions of 210 traffickers, presumably none of them billionaires, none of them with intelligence agency connections, none of them with the capacity to compromise presidents and princes and plutocrats, because the rich, powerful, and connected have an inside track to getting a better deal, and this approach has increasingly become an institutionalized way of thinking, driving the inequalities we see, and the Epstein case is teaching us in real time that abuse of power is not an aberration of the system, it is the system, it's the operating principle that governs how elite deviance functions in late capitalism, where the very concept of equal justice has been hollowed out and replaced with a complex calculus of political expedience and damage control. And what makes this moment so clarifying is watching the mechanics of cover-up operate with bipartisan cooperation, because left-wing and independent media have emphasized the bipartisan nature of the resistance, noting both parties have reasons to avoid full disclosure as Democrats face scrutiny over Clinton's ties, while Republicans grapple with allegations involving Trump, which means the shared class interest in protecting the system supersedes any partisan differences, and this is the material reality behind all the performative opposition. When it comes to defending the prerogatives of wealth and power, both parties close ranks instantly, which is why you're watching Democrats release photos while the full files remain locked away, why you're watching Republicans who spent months blocking the release suddenly claim they want transparency once they figured out how to control the disclosure. This is collaborative obfuscation dressed up as adversarial oversight, and the American people are supposed to be too exhausted or too cynical or too distracted to notice that nobody with real power is going to prison, that the only person who faced any accountability is Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence after conviction on 5 counts of aiding Epstein. The sole sacrificial offering to public outrage while the machine that created and sustained Epstein's operation remains fully operational, and what should terrify every person who believes in even the possibility of justice is that this case proves the system can no longer even pretend to hold the powerful accountable. We've moved beyond the illusion into naked demonstration of impunity, and the message from the top is unmistakable. There will be no special prosecutor, there will be no comprehensive investigation, there will be carefully timed document dumps and strategic redactions and endless procedural delays until the public forgets or stops caring, and this should radicalize you, because what you're watching is the death of accountability, the moment when the ruling class stopped bothering to maintain the fiction that laws apply equally, and the only response adequate to this moment is to recognize that fighting for justice requires fighting the entire structure that makes injustice possible, not just demanding this file or that prosecution, but understanding that we live under a political economy where wealth concentration has become so extreme that the very wealthy have effectively seceded from the legal and moral order that governs everyone else, and until we confront that reality, until we build movements powerful enough to challenge not just individual bad actors, but the system that protects them, we'll keep watching this same script play out, Different names, same impunity, different scandals, same cover-up, and the survivors will keep waiting for justice that never comes, while the machinery of elite protection grinds on. And if that doesn't ignite a flame in your chest, if that doesn't make you furious enough to organize and agitate, and refuse to accept this as normal, then the powerful have already won, because the only thing more dangerous than a system this corrupt is a population that's learned to live with it, and we cannot, we will not, let this become another scandal we collectively shrug off, because every moment we allow this to stand, every day we let them run out the clock, we're complicit in ensuring it happens again.